Welcome everyone to the virtual Charleston Forum today. I hope many of you were able to join us at our in-person event at Morris Brown AME in June, where we focused on the public history landscape of the area and our future of the past panel. And we had two panels that day. And if you didn't get to see them, then you can go to Google and search C-SPAN and Charleston Forum, because Google broadcast them for us and has those links available. So hopefully you'll go see those. I want to thank you for being here today, and I want to thank John Reed and his education committee of the Charleston Forum for really constantly keeping their finger on the pulse for what's necessary and what developments are ahead in the Tri-County education system. And you can see our last programming in that regard about how experts believe we should spend the unprecedented federal funding in this area. And those are available on our website under the education section. And the website is thecharlestonforum.com. And hopefully you'll see some things there that you like and want to press with these school board officials, and we'll get things moving in the right direction. If you have an interest in serving on the education committee or otherwise in the forum, we'd welcome you to contact us. You can contact me directly, Brian Duffy at Duffy & Young, and be glad to get you involved. Also, others who have been involved for us are those sponsors who make these things happen for us. And I want to recognize those sponsors for 2022. They include the Patrick Family Foundation, the El Hapa Foundation, Lynn Pagliaro, Federal Bar Association, Duffy & Young Law Firm, the Gallivan White and Boyd Law Firm, the Citadel, Henry and Sylvia Yashik Foundation, John Linton, Motley Rice, Post and Courier Foundation, and Dominion Energy. Also available at our website as a place where you can donate if you'd like to support the efforts as well. Now, I presume those of you in our audience today are familiar with what's coming for our school districts in the area with the change to single member districts and having so many board seats open. This is really going to be a fundamental, or it's an opportunity for fundamental change, or perhaps not, depending on where your interests lie. But it's a very important election coming up, and couldn't be happier to have this panel with us today to share their thoughts on what's important when we're deciding who should lead the districts in the Tri-County area. Let me introduce to you quickly those who will be presenting the information. And number one here is our moderator, Neil Robinson. We thank Neil, who's a lawyer practicing in Nexsen Pruet, for joining us. He is the chairman of the South Carolina Education Oversight Committee, which is a nonpartisan independent group of educators and business people appointed by the legislature and governor. And Neil has been at it for decades to improve education in this area. He spent many hours and dollars, including being the founder and past president of the Charleston Education Network. So thank you, Neil, for spending time with us today. Our panel members include Joan Robinson Berry, who is vice president and chief engineer for Boeing Global Services. And if that wasn't impressive enough, you can find her designated as one of the most powerful women in corporate America. And beyond that, she spent her many hours and talents for the Tri-County education system, focused on STEM education and serving on the board of the Tri-County Cradle to Career Collaborative. Jamie Devine has joined us also, and he's president of the South Carolina School Board Association. And he has spent time focusing on really what's at issue here. We're talking about the vision, the structure, accountability, and advocacy of school boards and its leaders. So thank you, Jamie, for joining us. Speaking of vision, Ted Dintersmith is here, and he has provided all kinds of vision in the education area and others with Charles River Ventures, where they do venture funding, but his focus on education includes an award-winning film entitled Most Likely to Succeed and a top-selling book called What School Could Be. So we, again, are very pleased to have this group of experienced and talented people with us to share their thoughts on where we should focus and be headed with these critical elections coming up. So thank you again, and Neil, please take it away.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for putting this forum together, and thank John Reed for getting down in the trenches and seeing that it happens. So I'm excited to have the opportunity to have such an illustrious panel. I mean, the extensive boardroom experience that we see in these three panelists is amazing. I mean, both the education and the business world. So I think we can get some good pointers. As you pointed out, I mean, we have an election coming up in just a little over a month. It's my understanding there in this district, in the Charleston district, there are 35 candidates running for school board. And I hope a number of them are watching today. They might pick up some pointers. So with that, I'm just going to jump in and kick it off and start asking some questions. I'll ask the panelists to try to limit their responses to a couple of minutes. We're going to have the opportunity for members of the audience to also ask questions. And I'll be asking Lynn Pagliaro to feed us those questions from time to time as he sifts through them. I'd like to throw my first question to Jamie, to you. You're closest to school boards on a day-to-day basis, having led an organization in South Carolina that focuses on school boards. What can you tell us about the attributes of a school board that really provide and guarantee excellent governance?
I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be here today in this opportunity. I am Jamie Devine. I sit currently on the Richland 1 School Board of School Commissioners in Columbia. I also serve as state president of the South Carolina School Boards Association, and that's a one-year term. I will tell you, I've served on my local board 4 terms. This is my 14th year as elected school board member, and it has changed over the years. However, some things remain the same, and some of those things, as a individual board member, that we should look for in some of those attributes include teamwork, communications, acting ethically, acting courageously, working with others in the community, having a common goal with your fellow board members. Now, sometimes that may not always work out, but you continue to work with them to make sure that you meet the student outcomes of what you want for your district. Now, I will tell you, as a leader in this district, as well as in my local district, as well as in the state, there are some powers and duties of school boards in general that's codified in state law. If we look at state law 59/1990, it talks about some mandatory and some assigned duties of school board members. Basically, school board members are policy developers for the school district. There's some other assignments that go along with that, to include legislative and then executive, which is hiring and evaluating the superintendent. Also, quasi-judicial. We also sit as leaders who listen to parental and student appeals as it pertains to the various school districts. Then we also listen to employee hearings, particularly teachers, as they come to us to appeal a decision of the administration or of the superintendent. Then we look at educational planning and evaluation. Where are we right now as a district, and where do we want to be in the next 10, 15, 20 years down the road? And then finally, we look at our financial provisions. What is the budget? Where do we put those dollars best to serve our students? At the end of the day, how do we get the most bang for our buck? And we want to make sure that those student outcomes are what's best in student achievement for all of our students across the various districts. And then finally, public relations. We have to talk to various constituents throughout our local district and throughout the state. And so we want to make sure that we have good public relations as it pertains to being a qualified or a good school board member. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, I think we all can tell from that, Jamie, that there's a lot involved in being a good school board member.
Yes, sir.
It's very time consuming. Being prepared for these meetings is important. Yes. And we appreciate what you're doing in that regard. Ted, you've written and filmed extensively on the importance of innovation and creativity and the traditional public schools. And having met with hundreds of teachers and principals and administrators, what are the attributes in a school board that would create the conditions for reform and education success for children?
Yeah, no, thanks. And I want to start by saying thank you to the organizers of this. I'm honored to be on this panel, and thanks to everybody for listening in. A few years ago, I went to all 50 states. I visited over 200 schools, interviewed lots and lots of superintendents, and without exception, the superintendents have made enormous progress in shockingly short times, turning districts around in 2-3 years. I asked them, what was the key to success? They said the right school board. So the stakes here are enormous. I'd offer this observation about boards in general, for-profit, nonprofit school boards, is the main roles of the board are to set strategic direction and make sure the leadership team is on the same page and making headway toward that direction. I wish I could say my general takeaway from school boards across the country was really positive. So this isn't an opinion offered at Charleston or at South Carolina. It's a national perspective. Is most school boards are somewhere between neutral to detrimental to the progress of education for their kids. And to use a geographic metaphor, our schools need to be heading north. And oftentimes I see these debates among school board members about whether we go southwest or southeast or due south. And if you're going in the wrong direction, nothing else matters. And what my work is all about is looking at the world that our kids will be adults in and working back from that and saying, what kind of learning challenges, what kinds of assessments and accountability metrics help kids develop the skills and mindsets they're going to need to succeed as adults. And I'll underscore that. I was a product of public schools in Virginia, not South Carolina, but I've been back to my high school multiple times, a half a dozen times in the last 5 years. Kids are still taking the exact same subjects, taught in the exact same way that they were taught when I was in school. And that underscores enormous challenge and I think ultimately ill preparation of kids, because 50 years ago, society, labor market, citizenship valued kids for memorizing material, replicating low-level procedures, and following instructions. And if you lost in that process creativity and audacity and curiosity, so be it. Today, all those low-level skills are done with automated solutions. The kids need to be creative, bold problem solvers. And if we're pushing that, grinding them out of kids, we're not serving them well, but we're also not going to energize a community around the kinds of opportunities that I think are right there for any district in the country.
Well, that's certainly true. And I think our next panelist, Joan, I think you add a great perspective to that from a business standpoint, someone who's run a major corporations, coupled with your active participation in education and social issues in this community. You have a unique perspective. So what qualities do you think the boards need in a trustee in order to strategically move a large public organization toward eliminating disparities in student outcomes?
Well, thank you for that. And I just want to let everyone know that I'm actually retired from the Boeing company. But I spent a lot of time in the educational side, and I have to just piggyback on Jamie and Ted's comment. But I want to start by making it crystal clear that there is a direct link between a healthy and productive business and an educational system and an educated community. It is imperative. I cannot attract talent to companies without having a robust educational system. It is imperative. And I believe Ted said that we really need to understand the changes in our economy, the transformations from information age to knowledge age, and what skill sets are required for that. So it's imperative that the school board leaders of the future do environmental scans, not of the educational system, its current state, not the political environment. It's important that they understand that there's a growing number of minorities and immigrants, that the teaching quality is not consistent across the board, to understand that there's more violence and unconscious bias in the system. And they need to understand that when they're deploying their strategic plan, the elements to mitigate some of those gaps are critical. And it takes courage. If you don't have courage, don't go on a board, because you have to have enough courage to fight some of those obstacles. we need an educated workforce for us to continue to have a great community in the country, high ethical standards. And I really like the whole notion that we need to move beyond just rote learning to being more creative and have more flexibility and self-confidence in this rapidly growing, changing environment, and a profound understanding of the importance of teamwork. So that's my thoughts on the topic, and this is critical for our community.
I certainly agree. For years, I've always stated that education and economic development are literally joined at the hip. I mean, you really can't have one without the other. And having been involved with Boeing since they're making the decision to come to South Carolina, and with other companies like Volvo and Mercedes, I can tell you that every one of those large companies look at the educational opportunities, not only for their children, but as a workforce. It's so important. So, you know, right now, at least one school board, and it happens to be the Charleston one that I'm aware of, is looking to revise its approach to governance, looking to be more focused on student outcomes than on administrative matters. And I think we've all seen it in the news where boards get wrapped around the axle with minute administrative issues, micromanagement, if you will. You know, a model provided by the Council of Great City Schools is what Charleston is looking at. So how would a school board candidate view this change? Jamie, what do you think?
Well, I think as hopefully whomever is elected, once they're elected, they attend the trainings by the South Carolina School Boards Association. We do provide that training, and actually the state law that school board members must attend training once they become school board members. And one of the things that we do talk about is avoiding the micromanagement, is avoiding those conflicts, is going back to what Ted said earlier. How do we be creative and innovative to move to the next level with our young people? Because what we know is that today, these young people are about 25% of our current population, but 100% of all of our futures. And so we want to make sure that when we leave from the boardroom, that these young people have opportunities and options that will help them throughout not just the 21st century, but the 22nd century. I mean, we're almost to that era. And so we got to not just look at today, we got to definitely look down the road. You know, there was a book written about 40-something years ago, Nation at Risk. And so when you look at what we did then and look at where we are now, we got to continue to elevate and to move that conversation forward, and not just have this, what I call this narrow curricula that we have in the state of South Carolina. We need to continue to expand that, because there needs to be other opportunities for all of our young people so that we can ensure that they get the best education, whether it's college, whether it's career, whether it's military, whatever that they want to do. And also to ensure that they graduate, number one, and have that opportunity to do what they want to do. So again, part of what the training that we talk about is to avoid the micromanagement, have professional meetings, treat each other as colleagues, number one, as individuals, to ensure that that you move that strategic plan forward. Each school district should have a strategic plan. And in that strategic plan, you should have creative and what we call in Richmond one, bold goals. You should be able to move those goals forward as an organization, continue to work with the business community. It should be lockstep, as you said earlier, what one does, the other does, and work together to ensure that your community will raise the best citizens going forward.
Good.
You know, if I could add on I think it's an amazingly important priority of goal setting. And what do we know about human nature? We know that people will go to the ends of the earth to meet or exceed goals they set for themselves that they believe are important. We lose total sight of that in our education system. And when you're given goals, whether they come from Washington, D.C. or the state capitol or some bureaucracy, if somebody else is shoving goals down your throat you have no voice in and don't believe in, you go through the motions. And one of the things, you know, I've done, and I've got a nonprofit that I fund that does this with schools all around the world, is invites those school communities to come together and give careful thought to what goals they have for their kids through these precious years of K through 12. And it's interesting because, you know, people get nervous about giving that kind of autonomy and role to communities. they never let you down. You know, these communities don't come together and say, I want my kids to be good at bubble tests and memorizing useless material. They have these great, inspiring views about, I want my kids to be able to create a fulfilling career path, or to be an engaged, productive citizen, or to lead a happy, purposeful life, or to be in a community where as they graduate, whether it's from high school or college, they can live in their community and have a great job. Once a community buys into the goals they believe are important, all sorts of amazing things are possible. And so I'm always cautioning groups to not just accept somebody else's goals for you, but to invite participation, because that's what we see with people. If they set their own goals, they'll just stop at nothing to meet or beat those goals.
Absolutely. And I just want to jump in on that one. It's not just owning that goals. And, you know, we have an old cliche is what gets measured gets done, or at least the visibility of it. And board members need to be held accountable for progress, or reevaluate your strategies and methods of trying to meet those goals and objectives. It's critical. I love the Council of Greater City Schools and their model, because it's all about accountability and clear, methods for achieving, performance standards. So critical. And I'm glad you brought that up, Neil. That's a great model.
Good. Well, Ted, to kind of carry that forward a little bit, I mean, you've probably been exposed to more school boards than anybody else on this panel by far. In some districts, board members most districts, I think, are elected, but in some they're appointed. Have you had any opportunity to develop a feeling about which is best, an elected or appointed board?
Well, I think, yeah, it's an interesting thing. I'm headed next month. Whenever I say I'm spending 2 weeks in Hawaii, people think it's vacation, but the most successful state that I've been working with has been Hawaii, where it's one district and the governor runs on an education platform that voters either like or don't like. And then the governor appoints the school board, and the school board is all on the same page. And they've had very well thought out priorities. And the difference over the last, 6, 7, 8 years in Hawaii is night and day. I think there are issues, you always keep your fingers crossed that an election will produce the right outcome. And it may well happen, in this upcoming election. I do think that most adults, whether they're running for a school board or voting in an election, have locked into their mind the fact that school, first, they think they're experts on school, right? We all went to school, so we're an expert. Whereas, the people that really understand it are the people in those classrooms day in and day out. And the second thing we kind of get locked in on, and I'm guilty of this for sure, is you kind of think school should be the way it was when I went to school. If you would ask me 15 years ago, what are the important things to push for in school? I would have said higher test scores, more kids graduating high school, more kids off and running to college. I said that would be amazing progress. I now question all of those. I think that it's really the wrong set of goals. And I think it's really stepping back and saying, help each kid find their own bundle of gifts, talents, and interests, help them go deep and learn and retain what they're studying, help them connect the dots so they see how their passion and their emerging talent can lead to a great career path, and help them understand that the essence of life is not jumping through meaningless hoops somebody shoves down your throat and out-competing your classmates, but it's actually working together to take on big, bold, ambitious cross-disciplinary goals and projects. Those are very different visions of school. And I think with the more we're locked into out-compete your classmates on mindless hoop jumping, the more we're sowing the seeds for poor futures for the kids that care and count on us to make good decisions, but also poor futures for communities and our democracy. And the faster we innovate and get to a point where kids are taking on bold, ambitious projects, learning how to learn on the fly, working with other people, leveraging available resources, and just sticking with it till they've accomplished something they're proud of, that is when we're going to be having communities soar and kids find their path in life in a way that's purpose-filled.
Well said. Ted, let me move to you and ask, you mentioned in your opening statement about the fact that newly elected school board members must attend a class that's mandated by state law. Do you think that board candidates should have some minimum qualifications in order to run for the board? I know that the state recently added for the state superintendent that have to have a master's degree. Should school board members have a college degree as a requirement in order to run?
Thank you, Ted. Neil, for that question. It's me. You want me or Ted? Me, right?
I think you, Jamie. Yeah.
Okay. All right. No problem. No. At this time, my answer would be no, because I think this is the purest and basic form of our democracy as Americans. I think that anyone who thinks they can run and is willing to serve should have that ability. I think that anybody and everybody has the opportunity to participate, because I think that that's just a basic right or basic part of our American society and our American democracy. School boards have been around since the 1800s. And so we want to allow everybody the opportunity, particularly in this day and time, that want the opportunity to run, to not run. Because I do believe at this point, there is no fees to sign up to run. I think in other offices, there are fees. And then there are also, it's become so political as well. And so we want to make sure that school boards remain nonpartisan and neutral and not one party or the other. I think that persons should have that right and have the opportunity to have their voice heard at the table. And we should go back to the constituents, going back to something that Ted said earlier. We should also listen to our constituents as they sent us to participate at the table, to have that seat at the table. And then we report back to them what we do. And so school boards across the district do it, across the state, do it differently. Some do it in annual reports as required by the state. Some do it in newsletters to parents in the district or to taxpayers in their district. Some do it by school, but reporting back to the general public to let them know what the strategic goal is and how do we do on those goals from year to year is in peril, and it's imperative that school boards do that. Some may not do it as well as others, but we have seen over the years, and of course, pre-pandemic, that did happen. Of course, since the pandemic, some things may not be the way they used to be prior to the pandemic, but we're working some of those kinks out. So continue to work with the school districts across the state, and then put your voice. I am so grateful for this forum today because your voice can be heard. And I hope that the candidates that are applying for those positions or asking for the vote, listening, because this, I think, is a great panel and just different iterations and orations from others about what we think are attributes of good school board members.
I'll add one quick point on that, which is I've seen some of the most amazing school board members are students. And if you require a master's degree, you're not going to get a high school student on your school board. And I don't know how many of the 35 running are students, but boy, if I were constructing the ideal school board, I'd have, one really great student, one student that hates school, and a classroom teacher or two who live and work in the trenches that really understand it. I mean, that's how you start to get the input that gives you kind of a full picture of what needs to be done.
And I would have to echo that because now that I'm retired, I sit on a lot of public corporate boards, and the diversity of thought that you bring to a board creates all of that energy and creative, vision. And so I think that you have to have, again, a very diverse board that brings different gifts and information and talents to the table so that we can create the best outcomes.
And I will add also to that, going back to what Ted said, some states do allow, and it is state law, that you must have students on the local school board. So South Carolina, that is not a state law or not mandated by law. But I will tell you that some boards across the state do have student advisory committees, and listen to those advisory committees. I can tell you one thing, at least in Richland, one that we do, we have what we call Chat with the Chair. So once a month, the district gets to hear from various districts, various students from various schools across our 52 schools, and they get to hear from the different students, whether middle school, high school, elementary students, and we get to hear from them once a month because those are our customers. Those are the young people that we serve, and we make sure that we're in those classrooms to listen and hear what they have to say as well.
And one last thought on that, I do think that education is important for all of the board members because this is data is our new currency in terms of everything. And they have to have, I'm a data-driven leader. it has to be about facts and data. The emotion, hearsay, and all of the gossip is one thing, but we need to actually have some kind of data science in our evaluation of outcomes. To Ted's point, are they maximizing their passion for learning and other key indicators? But I think it has, the board candidates need to have some education on the environment of the current educational system.
Well, it's clear that there are a number of weighty responsibilities that a school board member has. I mean, in today's world, just here in Charleston County, our annual budget is approaching $1 billion. And one of the key responsibilities of a board is to adopt an annual budget and to oversee how that money's spent. So it does take someone who has, I think, the abilities to make those kinds of decisions, which are spending public money.
Neil, let me, before we leave that subject, let me just say that, again, I mentioned to you earlier that new board orientation is state law, state of South Carolina. New board members have to be seated. Have to take the training within 1 year of being seated as a board member. Even if you get off, let's say you were elected for 2 terms for 8 years, then you wait out a term and you go back, you still have to go through that board orientation all over again. And then some states do require that there's continuing board education going forward. And then I will tell you, with the School Boards Association here in South Carolina, we have a year-long opportunity for board members to participate in Boardmanship Institute. That was started, I think, in 1983, and we do it every year consistently. There are 4, 5, 6, 7 opportunities throughout the year for board members to get that additional training. Matter of fact, we have one coming up soon here in October called Beyond the Basics. What are those new things and innovative things that are happening across not just South Carolina, but across this nation? We deal with school law. We deal with our legislative and advocacy conference that comes up. We deal with various other issues that come up across the nation and across the state as well. So I did want to add that to the conversation.
Yes, we in my profession are required to do annual continuing legal education until you get to my age, and then they assume they can't teach you anything more. But I think that's a great idea. Now, with regard to that training, how long do those periods last? Is it a day, a weekend, a week?
It depends which conference or which training session. The one coming up in October is a 1-day session. It's throughout the entire day. I forget the subject off the top of my head, but that is one training, one day. We have a advocacy conference in December of each year, where we talk about advocacy and we deal with our state legislators. We bring them down. They talk with all school board members about what they perceive to happen in the next cycle or the next legislative session. And then in February, we have our annual conference and we talk about various topics as it pertains to education, not just in the state of South Carolina, but on a national level. And then also in August, we talk about school law as well. And then each district can actually have in-district training too. So we then train our personnel within the district. So there's a lot of training that happens here through the School Boards Association. So we invite those persons once they're elected to please utilize the service of this organization to help make that happen.
Okay.
Can I add a training thought here? And this is really not directed at Charleston County, but it's something I feel like school boards all over the country would benefit from, which is training for all the adults that come to school board meetings. Because ultimately those school board meetings and the way adults engage with each other are role models for our kids. And one of the things that has me, I would say not concerned, but alarmed, is in the growing number of school board meetings that are just massive shouting contests with people throwing things up with no evidence or no basis in fact. And, if we think we're going to get to good conclusions in terms of school priorities that way, that's completely not what's going to happen. And if we think that's a good example for our kids, I mean, my gosh, it's embarrassing to see what's going on. So I think that parents have an obligation as they step across the threshold to a school board meeting to have done some degree of homework and to understand that they're projecting to their own kids and to the kids throughout the community that this is an acceptable way for adults to engage with each other. And if a school board and a school board community and that gets that right, I think that's really something to be applauded. But if they get that wrong, I think there needs to be kind of a wake-up call that says this isn't okay, because, you know, and Jamie can amplify in this far better than I can. The demands on being on a school board are enormous. You know, it's not just coming to a meeting and spending 2 or 3 hours a month. Many of these people spend 5 to 15 hours a week as volunteers. And when you start to have, you go through a period like we just went through, there's not a school board or a superintendent in the country that could have come through the last 2.5 years and made decisions that every parent in their school community said, bravo, perfect. I mean, we were dealing with all sorts of complicated, difficult situations that required decisions to be made that some people thought made sense and other people hated. If we get to a point in this country where school board members or superintendents start having personal information put up on social media, or people, you know, coming up to the doorstep and frightening their kids, and those things are happening, you know, when we start driving the well-intentioned, great citizens out of those roles, there's no winner in that. There is no winner in that. And I just think that there's a need for some degree of urgency around pulling the parents and adults in the community together and say, just remember, when we're engaging in discussion in these forums, we are examples for our kids of what we hope they'll aspire to. Let's be at our best.
Right. So let me, Ted, let me just add an additional comment to that. We want parents at board meetings, and as a sitting board member, I want parents in the general community to come out to hear for themselves what is happening. Now, we do live stream our meetings, but I do want parents to come out and want them to be engaged. We also want all of our districts have public engagement rules, and I'll share with you just real quick. Typically, you have public participation in school board meetings. That is a courtesy that is allowed by the school board. Typically, you have 2 to 3 minutes to speak. It's about an hour and a half session, depends on how many people are coming. You know, and that's up really to the board chair to monitor and to manage that process. And so, no, we want parents to come in, but we do give them rules of engagement. You know, one is, you know, let's not talk about persons that are part of the district. Let's not name students. Let's you know, help to perpetuate or advocate for an item or an issue. And so we do want those parents to come because we do want to hear. We do want to hear from them. If you know, Charleston's a large school district, and across the state, there are large school populations and neighborhoods, and we can't get to all of them. You know, I'm a single member district, voted from a particular area, and it's hard for me to get to all of my community meetings, having a family, having a job, you know, and various other community involvement. And so we do want to hear from those parents. But again, there are rules of engagement, and there are things in state law that allow us to remove persons from the meeting if it becomes unruly. And we have Robert's Rules of Order as school board members across the state. And so, again, we want to have that parental engagement.
Yeah. Lynn, have you got anything from our audience yet? I guess not. Let me move forward then, Joan, and throw this question to you. You know, while Charleston County gets the most press attention, the data shows that almost all schools within the Tri-County area with a significant population of children of color or poverty exhibit great disparities or gaps in their education achievement. What should we be looking for in a school board member or candidate with regard to this issue? I know it's one that we've been facing in South Carolina for a number of years. And the most recent test data that was released this past week continues to show those achievement gaps.
Well, that's an excellent question, and we will probably be solving that until, you know, to the end of time. But with that said, it's critical that we understand that there's not one strategic plan, in my humble opinion, that fits all. I don't believe that one plan for the entire, whatever is 1,000 miles of this district fits all. And we need to bring the entire village together to solve it. And I don't think that we do an adequate job in ensuring that we bring the companies in that community together, the nonprofits together, the parents, And everyone that has a vested interest or stakeholder in the educational system to solve the problem. And there's no integrated strategy that aligns with that. And that comes with training as well. If it's unconscious bias, if it's teacher quality, if all of those things matter, even the police department, every community entity has some kind of relationship with the community, with the schools. And we forget that. I like the school system that's in a Title I area. It's Meeting Street Academy. John, Reed knows all about that. It has the entire integrated community involved, parents, pre-K. It also has Medical University of South Carolina as part of the telemedicine, where they're looking at the health and the well-being of the kids. They make sure they feed them. So the wellness is an important component of that strategy. They bring nonprofits, and they included Boeing as part of it. We had this corporate school system in alignment. And oh, by the way, the cost per student was much less than some of the public schools in the area. So again, in order to understand that particular school, you have to bring every resource to bear to change the outcomes. And I've seen it done, and we can do it. We just have to have courage and push the envelope and ensure that we bring this integrated team together.
Yeah, the Meeting Street School model is wonderful, and it's shown directly that these students that come from poverty, minority students, can score as good as the students in private schools score, given that level of training. And I guess the challenge is how to take that to scale. It's going to cost a good bit. We've got to be creative. I've always felt there's plenty of money in the system. It just isn't properly directed all the time. And if we direct it in the right directions, maybe we can make some differences there.
And if you don't mind, I'm going to weigh in with a hearty defense of public education and mainstream public schools. When I wrote my book, I went all over the country and I picked examples in each state that I thought were the most amazing things that I saw spending several days in each state. And the book came out and my publisher got a note from someone saying, I bet this is just another one of those books by some rich white guy about how the only schools that can innovate are charter schools. And they asked me, would you mind responding to this? And the truth was that I picked my examples based on what blew me away. I didn't pay any attention to what schools they were or what types of schools. I went back and looked at it, and 90% of my examples were mainstream public schools. Very few were charter schools, because honestly, I found most charter schools to be test prep academies. Not all. I did a film, Most Likely to Succeed, about an amazing charter school network in San Diego. So charter schools could be great forums for innovation, but I think in a lot of times they've just been really grinding into submission test score focal points. And the reality is, I actually give public schools a lot of credit, and this is again a nationwide observation, for innovating under the most arduous circumstances. We put the public school educators in a straitjacket more than we put anybody else in a straitjacket. And I think what's really important to send the message to our classroom teachers who are dedicated beyond belief is that somebody has your back if you want to innovate, and that we have resources, and that's what my group does. We have resources that help you innovate in safe, confidence building ways. But, I feel like it's and as I said, I did a film, I did the best, I think, and the director gets the credit for it. He's a guy who's won multiple Emmys, but the film Most Likely to Succeed will, I think, stand the test of time as being the best film ever done on education. And it highlights a charter school. So I'm not anti-charter school. This was a great place and shows a very different vision of school. But as I did my homework and traveled, I came away with enormous appreciation for our folks committed to public education. And I think we need to step back and say, how do we help all of these schools be innovative and start delivering great learning experiences to kids? Because by and large, those teachers that are dedicated and serving in those classrooms want that for their kids. But when you tie them around an axle with, these mandated exams, I'll give you an example, and Joan may take issue, but I'm going to say a couple things about some of our requirements. And I've done, Joan, big forums with engineers at Boeing. And I asked the question, how many of you do closed form integrals by hand? I couldn't find a Boeing engineer in combined audiences of over 1 million. I have not found one adult in America who does what we teach in high school calculus. And when I interview kids who take high school calculus, none of them can explain what the concepts are about. I looked at this morning about what the 8th grade math that has to be passed by a kid in South Carolina. I would be willing to bet my net worth, which isn't a tiny bet, that South Carolina state legislators could not pass the 8th grade math test. And, you look at it, it's a bunch of bullshit. It's, imaginary numbers and irrational numbers and simultaneous equation. And I got a great math background and I never used any of that in 45 years. And I was like the top ranked venture capitalist in the country, backing companies that do algorithm development. And you sort of look at this and say, when you shove down the throats of schools and students, and I'm a fan of data, but let's start getting data that matters. Let's start looking at, do kids really retain what we make them learn? Nobody collects that data. Do we look at 26-year-olds, 30-year-olds and say, how did your K through 12 education serve you well? Nobody collects that data. We teach kids what's easy to test and not what's important to learn. And we have not moved those assessments one iota forward relative to what they were when I was in high school. And by the way, I have lead author published papers in technical journals back before computers were there. So I know you used to be able to, you have to do closed form integrals by hand in the 1960s. You don't have to do that anymore today, but we still hold up the pinnacle. Oh, take high school calculus, blow off statistics, which is invaluable for career, citizenship, and personal decisions. Take calculus. It's like, in what universe is this sensible?
Well, you know what? I have to say, I'm an engineer and a mathematician and a scientist, and I think that you're partly right. And I don't do, computational fluid dynamics anymore because it's all in the system. But what I tell you that's embarrassing is that and this just happened yesterday. I went up and I bought something and the computer went down. And the student could not do the math in order to figure out how to give me a refund. Had no concept because it was all automated. And in design, it's critical that you understand the foundational elements so you can look at something. And because you understand the algorithm, you know that it's not right, even though it was done by a calculator or another automated or IT kind of system. So I think that you're partly right that we need to reinvent the way we train, but I think it is fundamentally wrong if we're not rooted in the foundational elements of math and science, because they help predict the things. You have to have that creativity and foundation of problem solving. And this is, and oh, by the way, it's not about the algorithm, it's about problem solving, and going through the exercise of problem solving make you more creative and more innovative. And I've been, again, a chief engineer for decades. And so I just have a slightly different approach, but I do agree that some of the rote math and information is not required in a lot of different areas, but you have to have the foundation for creative thinking.
I think we agree a lot more than not. And, I think my point is that math tends to be more of a barbed wire fence. The main reason kids don't graduate high school is they can't pass their algebra course. And you look at the curriculum in the algebra and you ask how many adults actually use any of it. It's actually very few adults. The Freakonomics authors, Levitt and Dubner, polled their audience, which is very techie, nerdy people. Instead of the 4 pillars of high school math, algebra, geometry, trig, and calculus, how much do you use on a daily basis or a regular basis? The high watermark of their audience was 4%.
I get that. Well, let me, one more point, and then we're going to get off of this.
Yeah, we'll get off of this.
No, we're not having a debate here.
Yeah, we don't have debates because I agree with you, Ted. I think there's some foundational concepts that, and I really like what you're thinking about. But one last thing, we're moving from a pension work environment to 401k, and we would have to say that, let me just tell you how embarrassing this is. We have to teach at Boeing at the beginning, basic fundamental finance, because they couldn't do their financial planning. They couldn't understand the difference. So we need to equip our next generation workforce with fundamental math concepts so that they can manage their 401k, they can do basic accounting, and to really understand financial acumen. And that's, maybe not calculus, but that's a huge gap in the workforce. And we're having to do it at our level at a corporation instead of it being fully deployed at the foundational element. I hope that makes sense to you. And
Oh,
so,
no, yeah, totally. I mean, financial literacy is this huge window to all sorts of interesting math. And kids are interested in it. And I did visit one school in the district that offers financial literacy. So there are proof points and great proof points at that. Anyway, let's move on,
Well, I
Neil.
think
I'm sorry.
Financial literacy would be a good course for all students to have.
Yep.
It's
Yeah.
required. I
Well,
think Ted,
Well, the state has
point Ted
passed
was
that.
making
It
was
started in
that-
2023, personal financial literacy. That's been passed
Yes.
this year to start in 2023.
That's right. And it's so important. But I think Ted's point really was back to what he said initially, is that we're still doing things the same old way. We're still teaching kids in most instances the way we taught them in the 50s and 60s. And now, because of these things, all the kids are running around staring at their hand.
Yep.
And they got soundbite attention spans. So a 50-minute lecture is just going to go right over their heads.
Exactly. Let me add just one quick thing that school boards members, hopefully across the state, based on their training, should bring this everyday experience to the school board, to the school table, or to the school board, because what you all just said, I will just say this quickly, just to kind of bring it to Richland. One, we just had a board retreat and we talked numeracy and literacy, just about what you both talked about. There was a problem that second grade students had to do. And you had PhDs and masters folk in the room, could not solve the problem. This was a standard for second grade students, had to learn how to do a basic math question. So things have changed. And I would agree with you, Neil, that we depend on that little device more than we read one of these books here. So this is a great book. And so we appreciate you, Ted, for having that insight. And I've used this actually, we talked about this at one of my board meetings, just about the creativity and innovation that happens, not just at the board table, but what happens outside. And so as board members, that's why it's so important that we talk with our business partners, our business community, and talk about what are those attributes that you want to see in a graduate as they graduate. We have this profile of a graduate in South Carolina, but then we also go to our local businesses and say, hey, we go through the local chamber. What are those things that you all want to see to make sure that we graduate them, because I want our children to either stay in state or close to state as possible. It's okay to go up to a different college, but hopefully they will stay here, go to the university or to Clemson, whatever school they want to go to, but then also make South Carolina a better state economically, so that we all rise at the same time. And we do have those conversations here, at least in Columbia, to talk about, business A, business B, business C, banking. What are those attributes or things that you want to see in a successful student, so that we can then put them into a career around what you want to do? And so those should be some of the conversations that I think are happening at the table. And how do we infuse that into what I call a very narrow curriculum in the state of South Carolina, so that we can be creative and innovative and bring those entrepreneurial thoughts to all of our students?
but it's not just the curriculum. Let me just tell you, I'm a facts and data kind of gal.
Mhm.
And the reason why kids don't get math, it's not because of the old curriculum. It's because most of the teachers in our system can't do math themselves. If they were math geniuses, they probably would have a different profession. And we found that teacher effectiveness in math and their ability to teach math was a challenge. So we did we at Boeing back in the day did a lot of sessions with teachers on how to inspire and to really motivate kids in math, because they didn't have the skill set themselves. And most of them were at the bottom of the SAT test in math. That's the root cause, because math is not hard, it's algorithms. And so to create math to be fun and exciting, to inspire the kids, you need a quality teacher effectiveness program in the math and sciences, in my humble opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Anything to add to that, Ted?
No, I see we've got a lot of great questions from the audience, so we'll get off of the math, thread and get on to audience questions.
Lynn, have you got something for us? We're getting close to the end of the hour. Lynn, can you hear me?
I think there's some questions in the queue.
Well, Lynn was supposed to
Okay.
give us those. I'm not seeing them. All I see is lots of great audience questions.
Neil, there's a different thing you can click on, Q&A, that's got 9 questions in it. I don't know if you see that on yours. And
I do,
Lynn,
yeah.
Lynn may be not part of this inner circle, so I'm not sure what's going on.
Well, here's a question. How do you translate goals to day-to-day actions? That seems to be the task of the school board. Yet they have goals to do. How do you move it to action?
So that is handled through the superintendent. Remember, board members are the policymakers that sit at the table and basically, not basically, but make policy. Remember the state law that I mentioned earlier, 5919. I forgot the last 4 digits. But the day-to-day operations is left to the superintendent. That is a lot of work to be carried out because I'm not sure how many employees are at Charleston, but there are a number of employees, and to deal with those day-to-day for school board members, you know, that's not within the purview of what we do per se, but we do ensure that through the evaluation instrument. And so once we evaluate him or her, we use that to make sure that they get evaluated, to make sure they have that effectiveness each and every day. And board members can also call the superintendent or give it the board chair to ensure that that happens on a daily basis. And also remember, board members are what I call at the 30,000 feet. You know, they look at this from a 30,000 feet, not in the day-to-day operational. That tends to be more staff, which is CEO, CFO, COO, that handles that kind of day-to-day type of work every day.
Gotcha.
And if I could, it's really the most important question. Yeah, I'm actually working with some people at the University of South Carolina School of Education on this, but I've been stunned to find that colleges of education don't offer courses on what I would view to be the most important thing for us to focus on, which is how do you help an existing school innovate? Ultimately, that's where it's all about. You know, if we can't help our existing schools make progress in safe, confidence building ways, it's over. And because the current model is a failure, it's obsolete. We need to get to something different. And I've learned a lot along the way. I sort of started with, oh, maybe we should change everything all at once. That almost always leads to failure. So we've got, and it's all free, so this isn't a paid commercial or anything, but we have our online community and resources, whatschoolcouldbe.org, safe, confidence building, teacher-led steps that start to shift the learning more toward a world where students have a voice in what they learn, where their learning is more connected to real world challenges, where students want to be in school and where teachers feel trusted to lead the way. And we've been having, you know, huge success all around the world actually with that. You know, I think in some ways I'm hampered by the fact that it's free, because I did reach out to several school board members a year ago saying we're not $31 million, but free. And I think it's better. I don't think they believe me. But anyway, I think that whole model of innovation, you know, because the companies that innovate don't have, you know, Google didn't thrive by having Larry Page and Sergey Brin say, everybody's got to do X. They thrive by saying, we're going to let you have 20% time to come up with what you think is important, give you some running room with it. And the things that are working, we're going to celebrate and pile on and move forward with. I think that kind of grassroots innovation model where we support and trust our educators in the field to do what they think will engage our kids, have their back in case it doesn't work perfectly the first time, which it never does, and then capture the things that are working and celebrate those and amplify it. I think that's where you see the districts that make huge strides in 2-3 years. That's the model they go with. And it's not some edict from a superintendent, because I think educators know a lot of these positions flip out every 2 or 3 years. You know, like, it's like, I'll wait them out. It's very different when you say, what's something you're itching to do that will get your kids excited about being in school and will equip them with skills and mindsets that matter. That's an innovation model that works.
All right, we're at the end of our hour, and I'd like to ask each of the panelists to just give me a 1-minute wrap of your thoughts based on what we've heard today. And I'll start with you, Joan.
Yes, first of all, thank you for this. An educational system that produces students that's grounded in math, science, literacy, and communication skills are still important to me, and innovation. Teachers need to be fully prepared to help students achieve at all levels, because I think teacher effectiveness is a critical component that each one of these school board candidates need to understand. And I do believe that performance does matter. We need to understand unconscious bias that's in the system that's impacting us for really understanding all of the nuances in our community by doing a great environmental scan. We need to enhance our commitment to lifelong learning. And I love the TED's concept of lifelong learning and flexibility and adaptability in this changing environment, brilliant thinking in how we can be creative. And most importantly, your role as candidates will create a competitive advantage for not only the South Carolina, but also our country. And Jamie, I love your thoughts as well. So thanks for allowing me to be part of this conversation.
Thank you, Joan. Jamie?
So I would say in closing, from a 30,000-foot view and from a state perspective, look for candidates who are there for the right reasons. And the right reason is for students. And that's who we're here all for, is for students. Because at the end of the day, we have what we need as adults, but we need to make sure that the next generation is ready. And I agree with Joan on what she said and all the things that she said, and I echo what she said. But again, there are some rules and some regulations that we have to adhere to according to state law also. And so we continue to advocate for those things that we need to change in the state. State Law 59/1990, that was the state law I was going to ask you about, that we were talking about earlier. But in some of those, we still can be innovative and creative because we do have public charter schools that are doing well, that are thriving, and we have public schools that are doing well. We have language immersion. You have early college and early dual enrollment with local colleges. And so there are some things that are innovative and creative that we can do, and there's a pipeline to different businesses. And so we make sure that as school board members, all the players come to the table and everyone talks, and make sure that you have a candidate who understands the local community and who wants to put children first. And I think that is most important. We need student outcomes and not what I call adult outcomes.
For sure. Ted, you give me a whole new perspective on TED Talks, so I'll let you close it up.
Awesome. You know, if I want to make myself optimistic, I hang out with 5-year-olds. I don't care what neighborhood, I don't care, it doesn't matter what the specific circumstances are. 5-year-olds are curious, creative, brimming with energy, innovative, entrepreneurial, all the things they're going to need to be as adults. If I want to get discouraged, I hang out with high school and college kids where most of those characteristics have been crushed out of them, all to the goal of having these academic path students get good at something their phone does perfectly. And so I think that if we step back and think about those young kids, understand that we don't have to put something in them that's not there in the first place. We just need to stop screwing it up and understand this. They look at us, they trust us, we're the adults, they're the 5-year-olds, they think we're making good decisions on their behalf. By and large, we're not. We're putting them through a meat grinder, all to the purpose of somehow preparing them for some college application or who knows what, state mandated exam. We can do so much better. The opportunities are enormous, and I am rooting for this county, this district, to bring the courage and vision to deliver to these kids the kinds of experiences that prepare them to be happy, purposeful adults. We can do that.
Well, thank you, Ted. And I want to thank all the panelists today. I mean, what a great exchange of ideas and thoughts. I think we could easily have gone another hour. I want to remind the audience that there's a panel at the same time, noon tomorrow, with a panel of educators. If you haven't registered yet, you can do that at thecharlestonforum.com. There are going to be several other forums over the next 5 weeks before the election that will include candidates, or like this one about candidate qualifications. So registration information on that can be found at the League of Women Voters website. And any candidates who may be listening, and if you haven't already done it, please complete your Vote 411 questions that were sent to you by the League electronically. And if you don't have the survey, you can contact the League directly so that you'll be known by your attributes and not your absence. So thanks, everybody. Thanks again to John Reed. John, I watched you. You didn't blink once during the whole thing. It was wonderful. All of you again, and have a wonderful day and stay dry.
All right. Thank y'all.
Thanks all.